Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Speak podcast. A couple days ago, we were talking about new cards from the Duskmourn Commander Precons, and we were going to go through all of the new cards, which is like 40 cards. We got through half of them in an hour, and we decided, hey, let's not kill Jason with a 2 hour long edit. So we're splitting it up into two parts to split it up over a couple days, make it a little easier on him. So today we are going to talk about the other two precons. This is going to be the Death Toll precon and the Miracle Worker precon. You guys still doing good? We usually do our intros, but you guys still doing Gucci Gang from 5 minutes ago when we ended the last call?
Yeah, things are crazy now. Like, I actually won the lottery in those last 5 minutes. I'm a
Oh,
millionaire
word.
now. It's crazy. It all happened, and it's real, and I'm not making it up, I swear.
No one's life has ever been worse than mine is in this moment. I can't
Ec-
believe you'd ask me that.
Excellent.
We're no longer friends.
Excellent. I'm so happy to hear. If you would like to support the show, do all the YouTube algorithm stuff, like the video, leave a comment, subscribe if you're not already, check out our other videos. Most importantly, if you did not watch part one and you want to hear about our thoughts on the other two precons, the cards from those, go check out that video from a couple days ago. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can head over to patreon.com/geekinseek YouTube. All right. Let's do this, boys. Let's hit up these other two precons. I will be starting us off with the face commander for, I forgot the name of this precon. Death Toll? Death Toll. All right. This is Winter, Cynical Opportunist for 2 black-green, 2/5 human warlock with Death Touch. When Winter attacks, mill 3 cards, and then it has Delirium. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So this is a kind of Reanimator style deck. So you want to fill up your graveyard, exile some stuff from your graveyard to get something really spicy back. Cute way you can cheat Delirium is you could play cards that have multiple types, being like artifact lands, artifact creatures, enchantment creatures, stuff like that. That's a cool way to get to Delirium a lot faster. And then there's tricky things you can do with finality counters, like you can remove the counter. I think flickering works, stuff like that. There's ways to get rid of the finality counter so that it doesn't. Finality counters means that if it would die, you exile it instead. I think I'm kind of low on it compared to other Golgari graveyard decks.
Yeah, so as a group we're pooling our money together to get the 4-pack of the precons, and I'm getting the Golgari one, but I wanted it because I really like the backup commander. Winter is fine, like 2/5 with the Death Touch, it's a decent little blocker. It's not going to draw a lot of hate really because it's kind of an awkward deck. I don't hate it, but I'd rather have it be in the 99 than the other one. So it's not really my cup of tea by itself.
I think that this is. I guess I just don't understand why you would exile more than just one from your graveyard at a time. Because, I mean, you're only able to pull one back with the finality counter on it. So it's like,
I think it's to make it feel more fair. But it is okay. So if you're reanimating something really scary, it's worth it. Especially if you have tech cards in your deck to get rid of the finality counters and stuff like that, it's worth it. However, it is really awkward to exile cards from your graveyard when you're a graveyard deck.
and I will say, it is a 4-mana 2/5 with Death Touch, and whenever it is, whenever it attacks, you are gonna mill. And all of this is like predicated upon if you actually decide to do its ability at your end step, because it's a May ability, so you don't have to. So if you just want to run this as a 2/5 creature with Death Touch for 4 mana that when it attacks you mill a card, I think that Golgari graveyard decks are going to be fine with that.
Yeah. But Preston, since you were so hyped about the backup commander, what is the backup commander?
All right, the backup commander is Rendmaw, Creaking Nest for 3, a black and a green. It's a 5/5 legendary artifact creature Scarecrow with Menace and Reach. When it enters, and whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player creates a tap 2/2 black creature token with flying. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. So this is still doing that whole wanting to play things with multiple types on it, but you're making goading creatures. It's a big guy, so he's, hitting people for 5 with that menace and reach, so he's good at blocking and defense. I don't know, just something about this really tickles the brain.
It is pretty spicy. It's pretty fun. I like Goad. I like the little bit of chaos that ensues with giving your opponents these creatures, and it makes you play sort of a Delirium deck without specifically saying Delirium, just because it will make you play the stuff with multiple card types. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's a cool card to have in this precon, but I think that it's going to be the more exciting commander to build out of the two.
All right, hang into the 99. Jason, what do we got?
So first up, we have Ursine Monstrosity. For 2 and a green, it is a bear mutant 3/3 with trample. It says at the beginning of combat on your turn, mill a card and choose an opponent at random. Ursine Monstrosity attacks that player this combat if able. Until end of turn, Ursine Monstrosity gains indestructible and gets +1/+1 for each card type among cards in your graveyard. Oh man, this actually is pretty good. I think entering as a 3/3 with trample, it's only going to get bigger each combat. Like you don't even have to attack with it the turn that you play it. You just play it. You go to combat. It's going to get bigger. This is. I don't think that this is going to stay a 3/3 for long. Most of the time that it gets played. I really think that you pay 3 mana, and at the least you make it a 4/4 with trample. I think most of the time it's going to be closer to like a 5/5 with trample or a 6/6 with trample. But man, the fact that it's going to get indestructible every turn after combat, well, at the beginning of combat on your turn, it's going to get indestructible until the end of your turn. But every turn that you have, it's going to be indestructible. I think that this is a really, really, really powerful creature.
I'm willing to play ball because it gets indestructible when it attacks. That is...
No, it doesn't get indestructible when it attacks. It gets indestructible at the beginning of combat. This whole ability has to resolve before you attack.
Yeah. But my point is that if this was just getting clumsily thrown into combat and it has to attack players at random, and what did we decide? That
there's a chance it's just going to die.
Yeah, there's a good chance that if it's only a 3/3, it's just going to die. But the fact that it's going to get that buff and it's going to be indestructible, I think that means that this is probably good, especially because it's going to fill your graveyard a little bit. It's not very efficiently filling your graveyard, but it will a little bit.
Well, the idea with this is you play it in a deck where you already want to be filling your graveyard, so you're going to have other effects and other abilities that are doing that already.
Yeah.
So this is really, really good because of the indestructible specifically. If it didn't have the indestructible on there, like if it wasn't being made indestructible before you attacked with it every time you attacked, then it wouldn't be nearly as good. But this card is actually, I just think for 3 mana, you get this in a Graveyard Matters deck. I just think that this card is really, really strong.
Yeah, it lets you go to combat and do the thing in Commander you want to do, where you go to combat, swing in, then on your second turn you play your board wipe, because he'll just live the board wipe every time.
That's true.
Cool.
I
like this funky little bear.
Also, think about it this way. Things triggering on combat damage is good. Things triggering on attacks is better. Things triggering at the beginning of combat is supreme. It is perfect.
Also, people can't get mad when you swing it because it was random.
It was random. I had to roll the dice.
Yeah, I could see it being pretty cool. Next up, we got Demolisher Spawn. This is a funky little guy, too. This is for 5 green, 7 mana, 7/7, horror, enchantment creature. So, gain delirium faster with those multiple types. It has trample and haste. Wait, why has it got haste? And when it attacks, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, because delirium, other attacking creatures get +4/+4 until end of turn. So this is like the graveyard deck version of Craterhoof Behemoth, I guess.
It's the graveyard version of Overwhelming Stampede. Let's not get crazy.
Yeah, it's probably more like that. Or wait, there was another one like this. It was from Eldritch Moon. Decimator of the Provinces, I think was the card. Like it kind of feels more like that, yeah. But I don't know. I guess if you're trying to swing out and you just need a good finisher in your graveyard deck, this seems like a really good option. It's a 7-mana 7/7 with trample and haste, so it's going to happen right away. If you already have a little bit of a board state already, that +4/+4 is insane. Yeah, this actually feels pretty good.
This is a late game finisher for sure, but I wish that it gave itself the +4/+4. I think you just lose a lot of value there. I mean, because I think 7 mana, with this ability, this has trample and haste. I feel like that you play that towards the end of games, and that should win you the game a lot of the time, if not kill one or two players at the table. But I don't know. I kind of just wish that it was a little bit stronger. And I can't believe I'm saying that about a green creature that has this type of effect and all the powerful things that green is able to do. But I kind of just wish this was a little bit stronger.
Well, I mean, it's not
It
as good
can't
as
give
Crater
it.
Hoof, but Crater Hoof is broken. So
Yeah.
Well, the thing that makes the reason you really can't let it get itself bigger is because it gets it every time it attacks. So if you don't manage to get the win with that one swing, you're still getting that huge buff next turn too.
Yeah, but it's not like they're getting counters. They're getting it until end of turn. So, and once you pass your turn, the creatures are small again, and your opponents can potentially either deal with them or.
I'm
He should have
excited
been
to
a
give it a
dinosaur
try.
though.
He
That's
does
clearly
kind
a
of look like
dinosaur
a
in that art.
yeah, like a crocodile or a dinosaur or something. He looks reptilian.
You could even make it a dinosaur horror. Like, you could do that. Why
Yep.
couldn't you do that?
Preston, what do we got next?
All right. Next up, we have Deluge of Doom. For 2 and a black, it's a sorcery. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of card types among cards in your graveyard. That one feels a little risky. Like, it is a cheap board wipe, but you have to
So
have the graveyard set up, and you have to make sure no one can exile it at instant speed.
that would be busted. Like
And there's
so
just a
sad if someone
limit to how
like
big it can be.
someone just crop rotations into Bajuka Bog, exiles your graveyard in response to this. Oh, it's so sad. But okay, so what is the cap on this? 9? There's 9. Are there 9 card types?
We
So
we determined that in the 2 episodes ago.
so max this is 3 mana -9/-9. Okay, that's very efficient if you can consistently do that. But how consistently are you going to do that is the question. If you're really leaning into it, you will add some number of battles, some number of kindred spells, stuff like that. You will push hard to make sure you get there, but even then, you're not guaranteed. Like, how many battles are you really going to put in your deck? How many kindred spells are you really going to put in your deck? So, how many planeswalkers are you really going to put in your deck? Even so,
I think 4 is the safe assumption with this card most of the time. I feel like 4 is not too hard to hit with most decks.
yeah, 4 seems easy. So at that point, is it good? I would say no. At this point, like Toxic Deluge is like, it's not like a budget card, but it's got reprinted a few times and it's not expensive like it used to be. Like if you want a similar kind of board wipe, just play Toxic Deluge.
If you have a deck that cares about if you have a graveyard deck that has a lot of creature types, or if you have a deck that just cares about Delirium in the first place, this card is great in those decks. Outside of that, there's just better options. The one thing that's nice about this is it gets around indestructible. That's the one thing that's pretty nice about this. But depending on what it is, even if you max out your card types and you have 9 in your graveyard and things are going to get -9/-9, there's certain stuff that's still not going to die to that.
Blightsteel does not die to that. Yeah. There are awkward situations. But what is nice about the really cheap, efficient board wipes is that means after the board wipe, you have mana to start rebuilding before your opponents. So that's also relevant, I guess. All right, what do we got?
So next up, we have Formless Genesis. This is a kindred sorcery. It's a shapeshifter for 2 and a green. It is a changeling. So this card is every creature type. And it says create X create an XX colorless shapeshifter token with Changeling and Death Touch, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard, and then it has Retrace. Retrace is just an ability where it says you may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a land card in addition to paying its other costs. So you pay 3, you get a XX colorless shapeshifter, with Death Touch, and its power, its power and toughness are going to be equal to the number of lands in your graveyard when you play it, and then you can do it again by paying the same amount and discarding a land.
And every time you cast it, it makes the next one bigger because you have to discard a land into your graveyard.
Yep.
Exactly. So this is
The best part
just
about this is
nuts.
in this style of deck, the Kindred. That's what's the kicker on this. Like, Kindred is one of the card types that's hardest to get a decent amount of. This doesn't seem terrible. I mean, it's not like super efficient, right? Like, unless you're like playing a bunch of fetch lands and you're aggressively self-milling, how many lands are you really going to get in there? But the fact that it's repeatable with the Retrace means that you could probably end up adding a decent amount of bodies to the board depending on how your hand is looking and how many lands you're ending up with. But it's also putting a Kindred spell into your graveyard. So I think in this style of deck, it's actually kind of insane. Like, this seems really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really, really good card. Also, I love the art. It has some sweet art on it.
I really like a lot of the art in this set.
Such a cool set.
Next up, we have Convert to Slime, which is for 3, a black and green, so 5 mana sorcery. Destroy up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, and up to 1 target enchantment. Then, Delirium. If there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, you create an XX green ooze creature token, where X is the total mana value of permanents destroyed this way. This reminds me of Decimate, which was like a Gruul powerhouse for a long time, but the problem with Decimate is that you have to have the legal targets. This, you don't have to have the legal targets. It says up to. So if there's not an artifact, an enchantment, and a creature to blow up, you could just choose some of those. But this also in the graveyard decks is fairly consistently also going to leave a decent body behind. So this seems pretty cool. I really like Decimate. I still play sometimes, and this is just objectively better. So yeah, I like it.
What's really cool about this is you can target one of your own things if you need to get the Delirium, and then it just becomes, do I feel comfortable trading this card for a huge creature? The fact that you could make this thing mad, because I'm thinking about, like, if the artifact is like the Immortal Sun, or like a oh God, I'm trying to think of, what's the 9 mana artifact creature where when it dies you make 3 golems? Yes, if you were to destroy your own Phyrexian Triniform, you destroy someone's like Valgavoth, and then you destroy someone's Omniscience. You add the mana value up of all those cards, and you just made a huge ooze. So, I think that there's a lot of utility in this card, which I love cards that have utility to them. And for 5 mana, even just to destroy 3 of those things, that seems pretty efficient. I wish a little bit that this was an instant instead of a sorcery. But I don't think that holds this card up from being really, really strong.
Yeah, I like the card. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. Give it a B.
Oh, okay. Well, Preston, what do we got next?
All right, next we have Into the Pit for 2 and a black. It's an enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Calm down, Jason. You may cast spells from the top of your library by sacrificing a non-land permanent in addition to paying their other cost. That's pretty good. You can start doing some pretty gross stuff with that, I feel like.
This with Bolas's Citadel.
Why do you need this with Bolas's Citadel?
No, I guess you don't.
Just use Bolas's Citadel.
Yes.
Well, if you're starting to run low on life, you can use this one instead.
But here's the thing. As I think fairly this card is decent, but the decks that actually want things in their graveyard or are sacrifice decks, this is insane. I mean, this is, I guess it's the poor man's Bolus Citadel is maybe more of what I meant to say. Is like, it's not as good as Bolus Citadel, but it's half the mana, and there's extra synergies in certain decks. So, I really like this one.
So if you pair this with like a persist, like if you pair this with like a persist combo where you're sacrificing a creature with persist, it's coming back with a -1/-1 counter, but you have some sort of effect to give it a +1/+1 counter, like either when it enters or what have you. You now have like a thing that you can sacrifice no matter what to the Into the Pit to play spells from the top. It's a really interesting way for black to get this ability. And I think that this is really, really cool. It's a lot more fair than Bolus' Citadel, which is one thing that I really like about it. And I think that because it's a lot more fair, making it 2 and a black, just 3 mana, it seems appropriate. I think that this is a fantastic card.
Yeah, this is a good version of that effect. Bolus Citadel is broken.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm gonna have to try it out. What do we got next, Jason?
Next, we have Demonic Covenant. This is a kindred enchantment. It is a demon. For 4 and 2 black, it says whenever one or more demons you control attack a player, you draw a card and you lose a life. At the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 black demon creature token with flying, then mill 2 cards. If 2 cards that share all their card types were milled this way, sacrifice Demon Covenant. I don't like this card. I think it's good in demon decks. Outside of that, I don't like it.
It's okay in this deck because it says they share it. You sacrifice it if they share all of the same types. And since in this deck there's a lot of cards that are like, this is an artifact creature, this is an enchantment creature. They're both creatures, but they don't share all the same type. So it's less likely that it's going to get sacrificed right away in this kind of deck. But even in demon decks, I don't actually think it's that good. Like, it's probably going to draw you a few cards, but then that's probably it. Like, what are they like? In a demon deck, you have to play a lot of lands. So it might go that on your end step, you mill 2 lands or something, and then it just goes away. That was 6 mana, maybe draw a couple cards, lose a couple life, get 1 flyer. That just seems really inefficient. But it is also kindred, so it's helping you get to delirium faster. So I don't know. Yeah.
well, if you hit 2 lands, that means you just got 2 lands out of the way, and you're already at least 6 mana.
I guess that's true.
not nothing.
But you never
It's
want to
not
miss
a
your land drop.
amazing
You never
Yeah.
want to miss your land drop, though. You want to get to the late game where you're double spelling and stuff.
No. I mean, even if your hand is flooded, you still don't want to miss your land drop. You're just like, all right, I really only want 2 of these lands right now. No one's ever like, man, I'm glad I didn't get to play my land that turn. I've never heard that said once.
I know Steven might have said it.
Steven is a little sus.
Yeah, he a little sussy boy. Okay. I think it's mid.
I think it's less than mid, personally.
Last card from this precon before we move on to the last precon. Finally, I'm so tired, guys. I want to go to bed. This is another room. This is a polluted cistern with dim oubliette. Oubliette?
I think Oubliette is right.
Polluted cistern says whenever one or more cards are put into your graveyard from your library, each opponent loses 1 life for each card type among those cards. And then dim oubliette is 5 mana. When you unlock this room, mill 3 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It seems okay. It just seems inefficient. Like, I think if you want either of these kind of effects, like, there's just better versions of this card. I think that rooms, I haven't really got to play with rooms. My impression, though, is that they probably play better than they read because they're so flexible. With that said, though, I think if I want these effects, I probably play other cards over these.
Well, okay. Here's my pushback on that. The first one, it's 2 mana, and that is if that is something that I want to do in my deck, that is an ability that I will gladly pay 2 mana for. I think that it's really, really good at the 2 mana cost for what it does. And then the fact that you can also just get a creature from your graveyard back onto the battlefield by paying 5 mana. The utility in that is really excellent, but because this is on one card, you save a card slot in your 99 for something else that you might need, instead of having to waste 2 card slots on 2 separate things that are going to do these things. So I don't think that it's necessarily great for every deck, but for these mill decks, this is one of the best cards that I think you could play. I mean, if we're talking, budget and not trying to get too spicy or combo-y with it. I think that this is one of the better cards that you could play in a mill deck.
You do want to play a lot of small ones to make that first ability worth it. Because if it's like you mill a bunch of cards at once, you're going to cap out pretty quickly about how much damage you're actually doing. So
Yeah,
that's
so
one thing to consider, but
you want individual mill triggers.
Yeah, it's not going to add a it doesn't grow exponentially, right? Like your
it's not one
uh
damage per card.
right, your Stitcher supplier that you spent 1 mana on or whatever is probably
Yeah,
not going to deal
so
any more or less damage than your Mesmeric Orb on
so
on
like
your end tap phase, right? So
mill 1 3 times is going to be better on that than mill 3.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I agree with Jason's point that the flexibility in saving the card slot is probably worth it some percentage of the time. I was just thinking like if you want that
Oh, wait a
first
minute.
ability,
I think
there's
we're
like
reading
Sir
that
Conrad.
wrong. I think we're reading this wrong because it will count each card type among all of the cards that you milled.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah,
you
but if you
mill,
hit 2 lands or 2 creatures with one trigger, you still
So like
only do
let's
one
say
damage.
you let's say that's unlocked and then you unlock the oubliette. Let's say you mill like a creature and 2 lands. That's only 2 damage.
well, if you milled one land, if you had 2 individual triggers of mill and you milled a land and then you milled a creature, that's still 2 damage.
Oh, I
But
guess it
like,
is also each
but like,
opponent loses the life.
yeah, and so like if you mill like a land and an enchantment creature or a land and an artifact creature, that's 3 life right there. And if you do them individually, it's still 3 life. But
Yeah,
Well, it comes
maybe
up
it's
if you
okay.
I
have
will
like
Maybe it's
say,
okay.
an
I will
artifact
say,
creature and an enchantment creature
Yeah.
back to back. Then you want it to be 2 different triggers.
no, because that's still. Oh yeah, because then you would get 4, because you get 2. Yeah. So I think honestly, because of that, I think that this just even adds more value to it because you're gonna get value on individual mill triggers, and you're still gonna get value on mass mill triggers.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious about it now. Now I'm kind of curious to try it. All right, we got one precon left, boyos. This is Miracle Worker. And this is a really neat one. Cool one to end on. Preston, lead us through the face commander.
All right. So the face commander is Amanatu Veil Piercer. For 1, a white, a blue, and a black. Legendary creature, human wizard, 2/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you surveil 2, which is look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest on top of your library in any order. And then each enchantment card in your hand has Miracle. Its Miracle cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 4. You may cast the cards for its Miracle cost when you draw it if it's the first card you drew this turn. So you want to check the top of your library, put it back in the order you want, and then cast your enchantments for really cheap.
This is freaking awesome. This is okay. I have been like kind of bored of enchantment decks because they tend to look the same. This has 2 big things going for it. One, actually 3. One, it's not in green, so you can't play a bunch of the enchantress effects that make a lot of the enchantment decks look the same. I mean, you're still in white, so you do still have some of the enchantresses, but you have less of them. So it'll make your deck look a little bit more unique. 2, because you're surveilling, and with the backup commander that we'll talk about in a moment, it's kind of a graveyardy deck. And graveyard decks are just kind of neat. I like them. And then also, Miracle is just kind of cool. It's going to let you play intricate ways of like setting, like, yes, you can surveil 2 with this card to set the top of your library a little bit, but you can also like be tricky about when you cast your brainstorm. You can, Sensei's Divining Top. There's all these like really tricky things that you can do with it. And then, I get a big mana reduction on my Omniscience or whatever. It's kind of cool. I really like this one. I really like this one.
I think this is such a cool commander. Miracle is such a really interesting ability because it gets around the casting restrictions. So like you draw it and you can play it right then. Like you don't have to wait until you move to your main phase. Like as soon as you draw it, you can play it.
Yes,
So it
it
gets
does
around
get
the
around timing restrictions. Yes,
yeah.
which also means you could cast it on other people's turns too. Like if you have instant speed card draw.
Exactly. So this is going to be a really really strong powerful deck. And this is the deck that I picked up from this set, but I actually got it more for the backup commander. But even like, I might actually just build an Amanatu enchantment deck, and then a an enchantment deck over the backup commander of this too, because both of them are really really strong.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on these, Preston? I know that you've been kind of interested in building enchantments. Do these tickle your fancy?
These two don't, but I'd be very interested if the other people in the playgroup built them. Like you said, this is different from the other enchantment decks because like a lot of those want to play a ton of cheap enchantments so that you can get those enchantress effects, draw, play. But this one you want to play more of the big enchantments so that cost reduction is actually worth it. So I think you're gonna get some cool decks out of this and the next one.
Yeah. Speaking of this really spicy backup commander, Jason, what do we got here?
So this is the Master of Keys. It's X and one white, one blue, and one black. For a legendary enchantment creature horror, it's a 3/3 with flying, and it says when the Master of Keys enters, put X +1/+1 counters on it, and mill twice X cards. Each enchantment card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. Basically, escape just means that you can cast it for its escape cost, and the reason that you're exiling 3 other cards is because on basically every single escape card, you also have to exile 3 cards from your graveyard and pay the escape cost. This is just another unique enchantment build. It's an enchantment deck that plays out of the graveyard. The only other one that the only other one that I can think of off the top of my head is Gen, the Mardu one, where you sacrifice an enchantment to bring an enchantment back.
Yeah, there's a few others. There's also the oh wow, I get the Nixia, I think is what it was, the Absian one from Commander Masters.
But to your point, this one doesn't have green in it.
Yes.
I like it. I like this card. And what's really cool about it is the fact that since it's in blue, you can play those bounce effects, bounce it to your hand, and then cast it again and mill a bunch more cards into your graveyard. And this is a deck where I would not mind a Thassa's Oracle win. Now, if you're comboing to that, that's one thing. But if you just like played throughout the game and it's like turn 7, 8, 9, and you've been able to mill yourself out a lot, I wouldn't mind a Thassa's Oracle win for that, because you probably did some really cool, interesting stuff along the way, escaping certain enchantments out onto the battlefield. And because you're escaping, you can just do it over and over again if you have the mana, because you're gonna have the cards in your graveyard. Because that's what you're trying to do with this deck, is fill your graveyard up with cards. So I'm not going to be too worried about or exiling cards from my graveyard to pay for the escape cost. But it's the fact that my enchantments, even if they get destroyed, they're going to be very like relentless. I'm excited for this deck. I think it's going to be so much fun.
Well,
You don't even have to build this as an enchantment deck. You can just ignore that second line and
You
just
really could.
focus on the mill.
yeah. Well, then it could also just go in the 99 of a decent amount of decks of just like an X spell that's a mill.
Well,
If you're,
it's
three
three
colors.
colors.
yeah, but there
not
are
a
some
ton of
decks
99.
there are some decks that it would go in, and then
Yeah.
it's just an X spell, an X mill spell, and in those style of decks, that's just making your hand bigger. Then the difference between mill X or draw X is a minuscule difference. So okay, this also, I think, makes you play different kinds of enchantments than the other one. Like Amanatu gives you such a big mana reduction that it wants you to play big enchantments, and you definitely can with the Master of Keys, but you're, I think, more incentivized to play smaller ones so that you can kind of not storm off per se, but get extra value. Like there's cards like Mystic Remora, right? Which is, you can't keep paying that cumulative upkeep cost over and over again forever. But, if you could just cast it from your graveyard, that makes it a lot more interesting. Or there's other enchantments that have sacrifice effects, so then you can keep looping them. Yeah, it seems cool. It's cool. I like it.
I also like that this card, this commander is going to work really well with all of those cards that say, whenever a card leaves your graveyard, do this.
Yeah, that's true. Like Sir Conrad, which was mentioned recently. Yeah,
It's also just going to be a big flying creature.
yeah.
That's nothing to snuff. Ignore.
All right. First 99 card is one that people briefly thought might be good in Legacy. I think people have kind of moved on from that idea. But this is Ancient Cellar Spawn for 1 black 3/3 enchantment creature that's a horror. Each spell you cast that's a demon, horror, or nightmare costs 1 less to cast. And whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was less than its mana value, target opponent loses life equal to the difference. So I think if you're playing one of those types, this is probably just an auto include, just as like not a mana dork, but kind of a mana dork. But it's even more bonkers when you're cheating on costs, like with Amanatu. You get that reduced mana. That's, you're doming people for a ton of damage. And then, if you play free spells like Deadly Relic, Force of Will, you're throwing so much extra damage at people. So if you're playing a lot of those free spells, this is insane. That's why people thought it might be good in Legacy.
You know what this deck does? It plays enchantments. It plays enchantments and it cheats the mana cost of them. You know what's a really good enchantment that cheats mana cost and is really expensive to play, but it gets cheaper because of the commander? Omniscience.
Yeah.
Oh my god, guys, we broke Omniscience.
Oh my god. But then every spell you cast is doming people because of how Omniscience works. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is so cool. So cool. Very, very like super niche and specific decks that this goes in, because if you're not cheating the mana cost for stuff, then what, you're not really
I
doing
feel like
much
a
with
ton
it.
of commander decks cheat cost at this point, though. Like, there's just so many different types of decks that do that anyway.
Well, I was trying to think of like maybe Steven might want this for Joda, because Joda is like you pay 5, but like it's like an alternative casting cost, so it would kind of work the same way. If he casts like a 12 mana creature and he's only paying 5 for it, then that's 7 damage he can throw at someone. So that it seems really good.
I don't think that this is good unless you are in decks that are consistently able to cheat the mana cost of your spells. Whether that's something that's that your commander does, or it's a decent amount of cards in your deck. 1, 2, or 3 cards in the deck that are going to cheat mana cost isn't enough for me to run this card. So I just don't think that this card is going to be very valuable outside of decks that are cheating the mana cost. But, like I said, I do like the idea of playing an Omniscience with this card on the battlefield, playing a bunch of stuff from my hand for free, and then just murdering people just by casting spells. Because it's literally a cast trigger. It doesn't even have to resolve.
It also is like probably plenty playable in Demon Horror Nightmare decks.
Oh, yeah.
What I was just saying is, like, yes, there are certain decks that are going to want this specifically. It's just compared to some of the other cards we say that about, this has way more options.
Yeah, this has more
there's
homes,
so many different cheating kind of things, like Cascade.
So, okay, I'll agree with that. This is the best niche card we've talked about.
So next up, Preston, what do we got next?
All right, next up we have Phenomenon Investigators. 2, a blue and a black for 3/4 creature human detectives or human detective. As it enters, choose believe or doubt. With believe, you get whenever a non-token creature you control dies, you create a 2/2 black core enchantment creature token. And then doubt, at the beginning of your end step, you may return a non-land permanent you own to your hand. If you do, draw a card. Those are both pretty good effects.
Yeah, so I think doubt is actually a fairly flexible ability because you could bounce something that you specifically want back to your hand anyway. Like maybe it's a creature with a cool enters effect or something. So it's something that, or if it's something that you know a board wipe's coming, and then you could just get it back to your hand where it's a little bit safer. So I actually think that the doubt ability is actually kind of decent. But then the believe ability also seems decent because the token you're making is an enchantment. A lot of the enchantresses are going to trigger on cast, but a lot of them also trigger on enters. So this will trigger those. So that seems relevant. So I think it's semi-narrow, but I kind of like it.
It's
I
good in
think that
ETB
it's
decks.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think if you have decks where like you care about ETB triggers, this is gonna be good in that because you're gonna have enchantments entering and creatures entering, and any other non-land permanent you need to enter a second time, you're gonna be able to return it to your hand, and then that's also providing you with card advantage because you're drawing a card. Does it go in every Dimir deck? Probably not. It is just a 3/4 for 4, outside of the abilities that it does. And what's cool about it is with that doubt ability, I mean, you can target itself, bounce it back, and then play it, and you can choose to believe this time if that's what you need more.
You can clone it, all the clone creatures. Then you can choose different ones for different things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, seems cool.
Also, it's just board wipe protection, basically. Like you
Yeah,
can get rid of all my creatures, but then I'm just gonna get an army right back. Like that's always just good on cards.
yeah, I agree. Jason, what do we have next?
So next up we have Soaring Lightbringer. This is a 4/5 bird glimmer enchantment creature. For 4 and a white, it has flying, and it says other enchantment creatures you control have flying. Whenever you attack a player, create a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment creature token that's tapped and attacking that player. For 5 mana, give all your enchantment creatures flying. I think that this is going to be really good in enchantment decks. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not super excited about this card. Again, maybe this is one that I'm undervaluing. It is going to make you tokens. Whenever you're attacking a player, this card doesn't even have to be the card that's attacking anybody. So, like, if you already have tokens, on attack, you're going to make more tokens. Now that I think about it, this might be a good card in Thalys. Might be a good card in Thalys. Because I don't really care about, having enchantment creatures necessarily, but this thing is going to make tokens. The tokens are going to be enchantment creatures, so this is going to give those creatures flying. Okay, maybe this is better than I'm thinking of it as. But, I'm just not super impressed with this 5 mana 4/5 with flying.
So 5 mana does seem kind of steep, but I actually think that this is probably a great finisher for white decks because flying. Okay, back up. Enchantment decks dirtle a lot. Enchantment decks go like, I do this, which draws me cards, and I'll do this, which draws me cards. And then they just kind of do that for a while, and then they deck themselves, and I don't know. Like, they need a way to win the game, which is why I liked Onyxia from Commander Masters, is because it was like, hey, it's actually adding some aggression to the board. Exactly. So I actually like this for white enchantment decks because it actually gives you a decent way to start closing out the game. If flying is not the best evasion, but it's pretty good evasion. It's not bad. And it's also going to be adding more bodies to the board that are going to be attacking, and then, maybe later they're blocking. So I like them. I actually like this quite a bit. At 5 mana seems steep, but it seems good.
Also, you can attack the player with any creature, so you don't have to attack with the Lightbringer and put it in danger.
Right.
All right. Next up, we have another enchantment creature. This is the Fear of Sleep Paralysis. It's a nightmare for 5 and a blue with flying, and it has Eerie, which means when it or another enchantment you control enters, or you fully unlock a room, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. And then stun counters can't be removed from permanents your opponents control. That seems incredibly oppressive.
This is a good card now. It's going to keep getting better because they are clearly going really hard on stun counters, and they're going to be for a while. So as they
Yeah.
just print more and more, this is just going to get better and better.
Yeah. And I actually like stun counters because it doesn't like it's not as much of a feel bad. Like it keeps the creatures out of combat,
It is with this one.
but well, yeah, well, sure, but the creatures that have stun counters still have their abilities. They can if you're playing creatures for their abilities, it you don't take that away from them, right? So it's not as bad of a feel bad. Whereas with the stun counters, you're just keeping them out of combat. But yeah, especially in an enchantment deck with if you have low mana value enchantments, you're able to spit out a lot of them. You're able to tap down a lot of things quickly with this in play. That seems kind of brutal. And then if
So
you're
you
really
want
scared
people to
about,
play Enchantress decks.
huh?
You want people to play dirtily Enchantress decks. You just said that. You just said you want to play a bunch of cheap ones with it.
Yeah, but at least this is a 6/6 flyer that's tapping down the blockers. So there's that.
This paired with the Soaring Lightbringer is nasty because you can make 3 enchantments on a turn when you attack.
I don't think the tokens it makes are enchantments.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
They are Glimmer enchantment creatures.
Yeah.
Oh, they are enchantments? Okay.
Yeah. I just read the card, Morgan. I know what it says. So with that, oh man, I love this card. I actually love this card. I think 6 mana, 6/6 flying. That's not the best, but that last part, stun counters can't be removed from permanents your opponent's control. Oh my gosh, that's just insane. I like now. It's like they have to get rid of this thing. Which is another reason why I do like this card, because it's one of those cards that's going to provide you with a lot of value, but it's not necessarily one that's going to be winning the game, but your opponents are still going to be forced to use their removal on it, and draw the removal away from the other stuff that you have on the board that's probably more powerful than this, but this is just stopping them from being able to defend themselves, so they have to get rid of it. I like this card so much.
And if you're really scared of them removing it, you could just run a few cards that proliferate so that the creatures you do get to stun down stay stunned down even longer. So there is that. We only have a couple more cards. Preston, what do we got next?
All right. Next up, we have Metamorphosis Fanatic for 4 and 2 black. 4/4 creature, human cleric with lifelink. When it enters, you return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it, and it has Miracle for 1 and a black. So it has lifelink. You bring something else back that has lifelink. Miracle. This is a good little card.
If you cast this for its miracle cost, isn't this like debatably the best reanimation spell? If you cast
100%.
it for the miracles cost,
100%.
like this is insane.
This is so good. This is so good. Like, I think that any deck that has black in it, if you're able to manipulate what's on top of your library, I think that you could run this card and you would find value in it. Ideally, I think that this is going to be more of like a late game card, unless you're in a specific deck where you're milling and you're putting cards into your graveyard and you're going to have something to pull out. But oh man, even for 6 mana, because for 6 mana, not only are you getting a creature back to the battlefield, giving it lifelink, you're also getting a 4/4 with lifelink. So I think even if you're not paying its miracle cost, this card is still really strong. Depending on what deck you're running in, you have those blink effects, because since this is just an enters trigger, you could just flicker it and then it's going to do the same thing. I think this card's really, really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're right that like even if you don't get to miracle it, it's not like a great rate, but it's not bad, and you're adding a lot to the board. So I think in these like graveyard decks, reanimation style decks, I think it's probably just worth it, even if you're not really able to miracle it consistently. Like I'm thinking about putting this in my reanimator deck, and I don't really have any top deck manipulation in it. I have the surveil lands, and that's I think it. So yeah, I'm a fan. And the miracle cost is insane. The miracle cost specifically, if you could do it, is insane. That 2 mana for that, oh my god.
And like we talked about, Miracle gets around the timing restrictions for stuff. So if you do this on somebody else's turn, that's a crazy amount of value. But even think about it like this.
Talk about
Even
surprise blockers.
like, let's say it's like late game and you've cast your commander a couple times, so now it's expensive to pull out of the command zone. You let your commander go to the graveyard, even if you have to play this for 6 mana, that's probably still going to be cheaper than what your commander tax is going to be, as well as playing a second creature with your commander. I think this card's really strong. And your commander gets lifelink. I think this card's really, really strong. Oh my god, this card's $16.
Oh.
I didn't even realize that.
That must be the one that is actually that makes sense. Because in Legacy you actually have like Brainstorm and stuff. So
Anywho, the next card that we have in this Precon is Redress Fate. For 6 and 2 white, it's a sorcery that says return all artifact and enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it has Miracle for 3 and a white. Holy crap, Batman. This is nuts. This is so good. Even paying 9 mana for that, if you've built your graveyard up enough, that's going to provide you with so much insane value. But the Miracle cost, being able to do this when you draw it, oh my god, it's so good.
yeah, the Miracle cost specifically is bonkers. But even if you don't cast it for the Miracle cost, you might just want this anyways. Like if you're an artifact or enchantment deck and you're like, dang, a Vandal Blast ruins my day, or a Bane of Progress ruins my day. This is like, yeah, I mean, you're in those style of decks, you're probably not going to be able to reliably cast it for the Miracle cost, but you sometimes will. And even when you can't, I just looked up Brilliant Restoration. Yeah. I mean, there's a good one that's I can't think of what it's called, but it's on the reserved list, so it's like $100 card. And then the next best option is Brilliant Restoration, which is 7 mana, so it's 1 less, but it's specifically a lot of white pips. Yeah, so it's a lot harder to cast. So this is easier to cast, but 1 more mana. Yeah, so I think if you just are an artifact deck or an enchantment deck and you're really worried about the blowout, I think you'd probably just run this as an extra layer of security. Just like in case someone blows up your stuff. It doesn't seem unreasonably costed. Even if you're not miracling it.
Yeah, it's good at its normal rate. It's amazing when you get to miracle it.
Next up, we have another room. This is Secret Arcade / Dusty Parlor. Secret Arcade is for 4 and a white. Non-land permanents you control and permanent spells you control are enchantments in addition to their other types. And then Dusty Parlor is for 2 and a white. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that spell's mana value on up to 1 target creature. I mean, this is really good with the commander, right? Because you're wanting to play big enchantments, so that's going to be a lot of counters that you're putting on your thing, so you're making things even bigger. But then also your other permanents are enchantments. Wait, okay, yeah, this actually is pretty good, isn't it? Because you're going to have to play some small dirtily creatures anyways, so that's just going to trigger all your enchantress effects for your other creature. This seems pretty good. Is 5 mana for Secret Arcade too hefty, or do you think that's still makes it decent?
No, you play this in any enchantress deck that has white. You just do.
I agree. Because
then everything that's not an enchantment is still an enchantment, so you still get the card draw from it.
Yeah.
And if you do the second one, oh my god. Oh.
Yeah, that's so much extra power. That's so much extra power you're adding to the board.
Because one of the things that I think you could run into trouble with in enchantment decks is, okay, how do I win the game? You know, you talked about dirtling around. Now this is going to make all of the creatures that you have really, really big, and you're able to swing people out and deal damage to them, while maybe some of your other enchantments are killing players in other ways. I agree with Preston. This is an auto include into enchantment decks that have white.
All right, well, we made it to the end. Preston, lead us through our last card.
To end off, we have Cramped Vents / Access Maze. So Cramped Vents is 3 and a black. When you unlock this door, this room deals 6 damage to target creature and opponent controls. You gain life equal to the excess damage dealt this way. And then Access Maze is 5 and 2 black. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand by paying life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So hit something, get some life back depending on what you hit. Then you get a free thing every single turn. Gross.
I could see this being pretty good, especially when so I think that Cramped Vents is just terrible. Like, if you just want removal, there are better options. Because 6 damage often isn't going to be enough to kill a lot of the things that you actually want to kill. And even if it is, you're not likely to gain any life. And that's just not an efficient use of 4 mana. And then Access Maze seems perfectly good, especially it seems better because enchantment decks tend to have some ways to gain incidental life. I feel like more frequently than a lot of other decks. Like, even if you're not a life gain deck, I think a lot of enchantment decks will just have more incidental life gain than other decks. So it's not like I'm playing a fair Bolas's Citadel and you just accidentally kill yourself. Access Maze, I think, is less likely to do that style of turn. So I actually like Access Maze. I don't like Cramped Vents, but Access Maze seems really sweet.
I think that you might be overestimating how good, or underestimating how good 6 damage is, because there are plenty of 2/2s, 3/3s, 2/3s, 3/4s. There are plenty of creatures like that exist in Magic that get played in every commander deck. There's a lot of staple creatures like that. So I think that 6 damage is going to kill what you need to kill more times than it won't. But even if, that's not going to do it, you play the Access Maze part, and now you can cast something from your hand that will deal with the creature that you need to get dealt with, and you don't have to pay any mana for it, so you still have mana left over to actually do something that you need to do to advance your game. I think that there's value in the Cramped Vents, but the Access Maze is definitely what you're playing this card for. And this is, it kind of goes into what I was saying about the rooms earlier. The fact that you have both these abilities on one card and you're saving a card slot, it's going to provide you with some advantage in your deck building as well.
Yeah, I'm really curious to play with rooms because I feel like they're going to play a lot like split cards or adventures or something like that, where it kind of feels better than it reads because of how much flexibility you have on one single card slot in your deck. So I'm really excited to actually get to play with rooms and see how they feel. I feel like they're probably better than I think they are. All right. Well, that does it, guys. We made it through this. I'm glad we decided to break this into a 2-parter. This would have been like a brutal 2-hour-long episode. But yeah, if you haven't seen part 1, go check it out where we talked about the other 2 precons, and hopefully you saw this if you saw part 1. We'll be back next week for another topic of the podcast, and make sure to subscribe. We have other content on the way. We'll be seeing you guys later. Bye.